How long have you guys been in this space?
We've been in this building 10 years now.
Okay. Okay.
Time flies. Wow.
Yes, it does.
I remember when we moved in, and
Yeah.
Things
doesn't
were
seem like 10 years
fresh
ago.
and new.
Yeah. So we already do have some questions for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And for Stephanie, too.
Alrighty. Wow. Well, let's see if I can answer them. Yeah.
I have no question, no doubt. You'll come up with some
You
sort
just
of
make
an
it up.
answer.
It'll work.
It'll work. Yeah. Things will happen.
How long you been with ZF?
How long now? 4 years. A little bit over 4 years.
And
yeah.
before that?
16 years at Delphi, now active. But yeah.
No. Now Borg Warner.
Well, no.
Oh, you were in the
No,
active
active
part.
side. Yeah. I heard Borg Warner purchased them, which I think I knew that was coming. I knew that they were getting purchased by somebody. They were struggling a little.
I did not know that. It
I
was
didn't
a
know it was coming, but
bombshell
it's
for
one
me.
that seemed to make sense.
Yeah.
It does.
I was like,
Right.
There's one concern that I have about it. But
We can talk about that.
In the second.
see, this is why I waited.
That's right.
Yeah.
So just
Don't remind me. What was that thing?
how about
you
those?
were thinking
Who's
about?
playing now? Red Wings. How about them Red Wings?
Or the Pistons.
Or how about the Pistons?
Yeah, but how about them? They both suck. God, it would be great if Detroit had like a first-class sports franchise that was successful. I mean, successful in the win-loss column,
Right.
Right.
not talking financially successful. I think they're all financially
Yeah, I'm
successful.
sure.
But Red Wings were good.
For a while.
Yeah,
I mean, and they seem to be consistently good.
Yeah.
they were.
Well,
It's been a bad couple
Well,
of years.
and there's, hope that they'll get better again.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
just not a really good period.
Did you guys ever see that documentary, The Russian Five?
Like that.
Oh, I thought it was great.
That was amazing.
so was that the period simultaneous with when the Pistons were good?
I
don't
think the
know.
Pistons were good before that. I'd have to look it up. It seems to me the Pistons were good in the late 80s. And the Red Wings, like from the mid-90s to 2000, were just, what a powerhouse.
See,
And that,
so we
because
had-
of all the Russians. Well,
We had that whole,
they kicked it all off.
whole
Yeah.
period of time there that we had great teams. They've just
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll come back around.
sort of withered.
It'll come back.
You know, in the 30s, Detroit's nickname was the City of Champions because
that.
all our sports teams plus Joe Louis made headlines everywhere. And, they were just cleaning up, and it was called the City of Champions. And I don't know what we'd call it now, but it sure would be nice to go back to the City of Champions.
Yeah.
Does Champions Sparkplug still exist?
I believe it does.
No clue.
I believe it does.
So if we attracted them here.
Oh, I think we're going to start. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion. Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world. And by DIA MTS, for advanced manufacturing machinery and lightweight components.
Hey, thanks, folks. Thanks for tuning in to Autoline After Hours. And I even say that to my co-host sitting next to me here. How you doing, Gary?
Good, John. How are you?
I'm good.
This is a big week of anniversaries for things.
It is? What?
So here's an iPad. You have an iPad under those things. 10 years, iPads.
I did hear that.
Oh,
I mean, so doesn't that seem bizarre that this thing is
only 10 years
only
old.
10 years old? It seems ancient.
I know.
Okay, so we have that.
Yeah.
Yesterday was the 40th anniversary of the Rubik's Cube.
Ooh.
Who knew?
40.
Who knew?
Gary, I am so glad you're here because otherwise our audience would not know that.
Okay, and then finally, okay, so I'll bring it back. I'll bring it back to the industry.
Yeah.
100th anniversary of Mazda.
Okay.
Oh, really? Man, that's pretty good.
Time flies.
Yeah. Toyo Kogyo,
Yes.
as it's formally known. And we got to let everybody know we got Stephanie Brinley from IHS Markit back with
Thanks
us.
for having me back.
Yeah. We'll get all kinds of insights and knowledge out of you before the show is over, I'm sure.
Good, good. Yes, that's the plan.
And we got to let everybody know our special guest today is Aaron Jefferson,
Hi.
Vice President of Electronics and ADAS at ZF.
Yes.
ZF, some people say, but I don't know.
Either way. either way works.
I think in Detroit, everybody's adopted the ZF.
ZF is a nice. It flows off the tongue better.
Yeah. So, and just in case there's somebody in the audience that doesn't know what ADAS is, what's ADAS?
Advanced driver assistance system. So essentially, autonomous emergency braking or lane keeping and things of that nature.
So that's all what you work on.
Yes.
All this stuff.
Yeah.
So let me kick off the conversation here. You know, autonomous vehicles. Everyone's been talking about autonomous vehicles. I think all the excitement is around level 4 and level 5. Yeah. Take your hand off the wheel, let the car take you wherever you want.
Yes.
But that's not here today.
No.
ADAS is here today, and level 2, which is kind of like adaptive cruise control on steroids, I guess, maybe one way to say.
Yeah.
That's where the real action is for suppliers like ZF right now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the real action is in terms of the market and what the consumers are ready for. So if you think about level 2, essentially means that you enable some automated driving functions, but the driver is always responsible. It limits liability. It's kind of but it's also the responsible, safe thing to do. So adaptive cruise control, you take your foot off the pedals, you let the car, monitor the speed. You can come to a full stop. It can even stop and go now. There's complete systems. But if something goes awry, you're not supposed to, have your feet tucked under you and not be able to brake the car, right? And you extend that to steering. And that's when I would say level 2 plus comes into play.
That would be like Super Cruise,
that would be like
Cadillac,
Super Cruise,
or Autopilot on Tesla.
Yes. And Super Cruise I think is seen as the most complete system on the market, meaning I have a driver monitoring system. I know what the driver's doing at all times. I only enable the function based on my map data. So they've mapped out all of this highway, road, and they know exactly where their systems work and where they don't. So you have to be in this geographical space that's safe. And you push a button, it makes sure you're ready. The HMI is really clear on when it's taking over, and you can literally just take your hands and feet off and let the car drive. As long as you're paying attention, as long as you're not, looking in the back seat,
Reading a book
or doing something crazy. It works
Reading a
really
book,
well.
that shows my age. I should say doing email, texting, and all
So
that.
you're reading your iPad.
Yeah,
or
right.
10-year-old iPad.
10-year-old iPad.
So Aaron, let me ask you, talking about this level 2 plus and in vehicles, John mentioned the Tesla, Cadillac. Okay, is this technology so expensive that it's not in Chevys?
Well, it's really a choice. I think the smart thing about what GM is doing is they put it in the Cadillac, they put it in a limited edition vehicle, and let's find out what it can do, what it doesn't do, get the feedback. And I think you're about to see a spread of Super Cruise throughout more of the platforms. But I also love Tesla's approach of, hey, we're going to put it pretty much on every vehicle we sell. And we're selling technology, and the vehicle kind of comes along with it, is the way I view their position. They get the volume with that. They get a lot of the user feedback that they need to improve and enhance their system. One of the things we're really pushing is, we call it the most cost-effective level 2 plus system on the market. Front camera, front radar, which is almost going to be standard on vehicles in the next few years anyway. And then some corner radar around the car, which is also rear corner radar is becoming a pretty standard product. And you can enable some single lane functionality, essentially the same functionality that's in the market today for much less than, we say it's a sub $1,000 system.
And still monitoring the driver?
You have to add a driver monitor for that. So our system right now would be hands-on. You add a driver monitoring system, then you can basically implement the full. But for me, it's not responsible to do it without that driver monitor.
I totally agree with that. Can you do that with driver monitor for under $1,000?
I think you might add a few more, maybe a couple more zeros to the price, but essentially it's still. I mean, driver monitor is not an expensive option to add. So it's if I look at what you sell a Super Cruise system for, which is around $6,000 after you add up their base package, and I think $7,500 for what Tesla's doing, we're talking Much less than
Much
that.
less. So
Much less.
do you have other OEMs, not GM, not Tesla, saying, hey, Aaron, what can you do for us?
Well, we have an SOP, started production at the end of this year in Asia, and we're really hoping to spread that out through many more of the OEMs. And not just knocking on our door, we're really knocking on the industry's door to say, hey, I need a solution that's viable and safe that I can implement. I think they're also trying to test the market to say, even if I charge $1,000, are people going to buy these systems? Or are they going to put that $1,000 into Apple CarPlay and some other infotainment system? So, there's a lot of market studies at the OEM level, but we really feel like it's really important to make it accessible to the higher majority because it does increase the safety as well as the comfort of the vehicle. But I expect, and we're looking at 2023 timeframe to see a lot more level 2 plus systems on the market where even if it's, hands-on and you got to pay attention, it relaxes and eases some of the driving strain and really takes on a lot of the responsibility, but still keeping that driver in the loop is what I'm.
So Aaron, what is it that this system does that makes it more convenient and safe to drive?
Okay. So the nice thing about the system, whether you have what we call our coAssist system, which is kind of our entry system, or whether you have a full-up surround view, cameras all around and radar all around, it's really 360-degree sensing around the vehicle, always measuring your environment, understanding what's next to you, what's coming up behind you, definitely what's in front of you, because if you're driving forward at high speeds, that's what's most important. And it is allowing you to take your hands off, take your feet off, but making sure that you're still paying attention. And so if you think about a lot of accidents, it's driver fatigue, it is maybe crossing over in lanes, especially in oncoming traffic. It's usually driver error, and it's usually driver error due to some impairment. And so you really relieve that stress and that strain. Even if you look at like the Super Cruise, what's really unique about it is, if for some reason you try to abuse the system, or let's just say you just happen to pass out while you're driving, it will essentially keep you in the lane, it will recognize that you're out, and it will bring you to a safe stop and start the flashers, and it does it gradually. So, it's not pulling you over to the side of the lane yet, to the side of the road, but this is about as safe as you can get. And that's that safety concept that they've come up with is really, really good. And so you add that safety aspect, but then you add that if I'm driving to work, most of us drive to work the same way. We know the route. You can actually drive all the way there. And how many lights did I go through? It's almost automatic, right?
Right.
And so when you get into that kind of mundane driving, I think it's best to actually let the vehicle do that for you, as long as it's a safe implementation. And I think that's where the market's headed there.
I want to say Cadillac charges $4,000. They package it with a bunch of
They
stuff.
package it with a bunch of
Right.
stuff, yeah.
But I want to say, even as a $4,000 option, what they tell me, a take rate of almost 40%?
I think they did, and then they said that just the other day they were talking about of the people who had it, 50% were using it, and the usage rate was really high.
Yeah.
And it was pretty limited availability at that point with just the CT6, which I think is fully out of production now. So we have to wait till we get the Escalade. And they did just this week announce the lane change maneuver will be added for
So
those.
explain that in case any viewers didn't hear that.
Sure. It will, what it has done before is just keep you going straight and like hands-free and all of that. Now, if you turn your blinker on, it will execute a safe lane change. If it can't do that, if there's just too much traffic, it'll tell you no. And just the initial, I haven't driven it yet, but just the initial information on it is they spent, like they did with regular Super Cruise, a lot of time making sure that the feedback to the driver makes sense.
Yes.
So it'll tell you, I'm about to do this. It'll tell you I'm doing this. It'll tell you it's done. And it'll also tell you if it can't, or if there's some safety, you might be able to do it, but you have to do it. So it won't automatically. There's a lot of feedback back and forth, and they've expressed that they've updated some other features with that and just made it more user-friendly than it has been. One example they gave was actually one that kind of resonated with the experience that I've had with Super Cruise. The initial application, you as a human driver had to get it centered in your lane, which is not always the simplest thing to do. People don't really drive centered. But it just was really hard before you could even push the button. And so you're like, did I get it? Oh no, not quite right. No, not quite. They've got it now so that you don't have to be fully centered in order to push the button and get it ready. And then it gives you a little bit more time, and it makes that engagement a little bit more smooth, at least from what they've explained. And moving to their digital vehicle platform, they've got new wiring systems and new power in there in order to make the whole thing operate much more quickly and more efficiently. So I'm looking forward to the second iteration of Super Cruise. I think that they've done it, and like you've pointed out, they've been really careful about the way that they implement it and try to have that communication with the driver and help the driver learn how to use the system properly. And you're right, Tesla has some advantage in getting all that data, all that miles driven very quickly, but their communication to the driver in terms of what it's doing and when you can use it is not.
No, it's just a torque center, right? A torque sensor in the wheel, so you got to keep your hands on the wheel. That's why I actually prefer the Super Cruise. I love driving with no hands on. You know, if you're doing a long trip, to your point, Aaron, it just takes a little bit less brain activity. You're not as tired after like a 4-hour drive, which I've done with the Super Cruise.
I think that's what separates the system in terms of when we're doing our market analysis, our market study, it's what's really going to attract the end consumer. And to me, there's one thing to have your hands on the wheel and just keep it balanced. But if you can really disengage in terms of physically, then I think that's the added benefit if you're driving from here to Memphis and you really just want to enjoy the drive, and even if you get in a traffic jam where the car can handle it. And the neat thing about the Super Cruise is it's still a safe implementation. Now you have the lane change, so now you don't necessarily have to just sit behind. It's kind of like if you have ACC on your car, there's no setting on ACC that is aggressive enough to keep people from cutting in front of you, right? So if you really want to get over, you just push a button. And I don't know this for factual because I haven't driven it yet, but I think the changes to enable that are actually minimal from what they had with Super Cruise. So
to have a more aggressive ACC?
To have a system that has the lane change.
Well, because it's got to see what's going on behind you.
And they already have sensors there, but maybe they're seeing further now, or maybe there's more resolution to what they see, so they know exactly what's coming, how fast it's coming.
I had the benefit of talking with them when they were first rolling it out, and that was one of the questions early on. And at that point, the engineers were saying they knew how to do it at the beginning. So I don't know that they needed it to change a lot on the technology side of it to add this feature.
No, I think they needed the lawyers to say, sure, go ahead, do it.
Yeah, they wanted it in field. They wanted to make sure that everything was working, and they very consciously said, we know we could turn this on today. We're not going to, because we want to prove it out a little bit more.
So I just wonder if you're behind somebody who is in a new Escalade, and they've got that left turn signal on, and they have that left turn signal on, and it's on, and it's on, and it's on, and it turns out they have Super Cruise. It keeps waiting, but you think to yourself, somebody driving a Cadillac, they don't know that they've got their turn signal on. We've all driven behind that guy.
This one of the open questions is we don't know how long. I don't know how long it'll continue to try and wait. I haven't experienced the system. I don't know if it'll try for 30 seconds or if it'll try for a minute. I don't know the answer to that.
So little sidestep in history here. Oldsmobile actually had a feature on its cars, I can't remember, in the late 80s, early 90s, that if you drove more than a mile with your turn signal on, it would automatically turn it off.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now they just kind of yell at you, but But
Yeah.
the Tesla system actually, in this instance, works really well in terms of it'll try. If there are cars that come into the space or somebody coming up pretty fast, I think it tries a couple times and then it kind of gives you a chime that says, "Hey, this attempt didn't work," and try, kind of try again later.
But in the Tesla system, if you set your nav and you set the speed, so the car knows you're going and how fast you want to go, if it comes up on traffic that's slower, it will automatically put on the turn signal and go and pass the car.
That is not the level that Super Cruise is at.
No,
Right.
And again, I believe technically they could absolutely do it, and I'm sure the lawyer said not yet.
Yeah, one of the things that I sort of wonder is, as a Super Cruise user, and I haven't experienced it yet. As a regular driver, when you turn the blinker on, we have a tendency to turn the blinker on when we're when
About
we
to go.
are about to go. We've decided to go. We know, we think it's safe, we're ready to go. Then we turn the blinker on. People don't tend to turn the blinker on when they're thinking about changing the lane. So it'll be interesting to see what the user feedback is in that little bit of a dichotomy in the way that you use things. Will they push it and think that the car is going to go right then? What's that gap going to be?
I'm surprised you think so many people turn their signals on when they're changing lanes. I mean, I don't know where you drive. I mean, it's
Right. Yeah, that does happen for sure. But
So, Aaron, what do you think the next steps are going to be? Level 3. And the reason I've asked is, some years ago, Waymo said we're not doing level 3. We're going right to level 4 and 5. Ford Motor Company said the same thing. We're, the handoff, as it were, of the system handing the driver's responsibility back to the driver. They say that scares the hell out of them.
Absolutely.
What do you think how it's going to play out?
So I hope the next step is like everybody in the world buys ZF's coAssist and co-drive system. Like we have the best thing on the market, they buy it.
what
But
price that is.
but I don't believe in level 3 to the extent that I think it is probably the most difficult scenario. And if you're driving 80 miles per hour for 10 seconds, you might as well be driving it forever because a lot can happen at 80 miles per hour in 10 seconds. So essentially the way we look at level 3 is it's essentially level 4. If you're going to have a real level 3 pure fail-safe system. When you start to approach a level 3 system is what like BMW tries to do with their system, in which if something fails, or let's say you're in automated driving mode and you have a failure, it will attempt to take you off into the shoulder. So it can recognize where it is, it can recognize where a shoulder is, and if it happens to be clear, it'll safely pull you over. If it doesn't, then it'll just try to stop in the lane, like Cadillac does.
But you're working on that now, that if there's some issue, it will pull over to the side of the road?
It depends on the customers. I mean, we have customers that want that as an ambition, but that's also a very difficult promise to make to an end consumer, and then the end consumer has to understand what it's going to do versus, driver, you're always responsible. We really feel that the level 2 plus market, and plus just means what we were talking about before we started rolling, was does it take you from your garage out to the car, out of your neighborhood, out to the main road, and then on the highway? So the plus is just more availability, but essentially the driver responsible until we can get to a real level 4, under all conditions, this vehicle can handle everything. Level 3 is just so much uncertainty. If you are then asleep or you're just relaxing a bit too much and now you have to take over, how do I know you're even conscious enough to really take over effectively? Or will you wake up, be startled, steer the wheel, and then cause more damage? And I know OEMs want to stay away from that. I would, So as a tier 1, we're developing systems and functions, and we have a roadmap based on the feedback we get from OEMs, based on what we think is logical and safe. And then when we get questioned now, or we get a requirement around level 3, we kind of question it a bit, push back and say, are you sure? Safe pullover is one thing, but you still want the driver always watching and things of that nature. So we have our responsibility, and then we're also trying to make sure we can satisfy our customers as well.
So Aaron, you're an electrical engineer.
Yes.
And you're in marketing. Okay.
Yes.
So I have a 2-part question
Okay.
here. ADAS, is the challenge technical, or is the challenge one of convincing regular people they want this stuff?
So you're asking ADAS or this level 2?
2 plus, whatever.
2 plus. I think it's both, but I think the technical challenge is cost and say time. We get a lot of people from the military or from defense backgrounds, and their perspective is, oh, there's a problem to solve? We'll just go solve it because we'll have a buyer. Automotive is the opposite. Automotive is, okay, yeah, that would be nice to solve, but it's going to cost $10,000 per vehicle and nobody's ever going to buy it. I think we're at a point now where the technology is mature enough in terms of the radar sensing, the camera sensing. LiDAR not yet, but Cadillac does not have LiDAR. Tesla barely has radar. You can do a lot with camera and radar today, and you can make it safe. And if you can put enough computing there, computing is kind of the limiting factor now, but silicon's getting more and more powerful. Cost is coming down rapidly. So technically, I don't think that'll be an inhibitor. I think it is building the confidence of the consumers that, there are people with ACC today that don't use it because they're just not comfortable. There are people with lane keeping was a bit was a bit of a false introduction into the market because there were beeps and you could turn it off, so everybody just turned it off, as opposed to trying to figure out, how is it going to help me maybe save my life. But I think there's a mix. I think from a marketing perspective, you see advertisements all the time now. I mean, it's like a I won't call it a level 4 race, but it's essentially a lot of competition, especially in the U.S., to say, these are the features I provide. Toyota is a great example that they barely had blind spot, and now they have AEB and they have front sensing on every vehicle they sell, from the Yaris up to their full Lexus line. So the technology's here, and then I think the consumer acceptance is gradual. Can you get them used to an ACC? Can you get them used to a lane centering? Can you lessen the amount of incidents in the field that shouldn't happen? So when you have responsible systems like the Super Cruise and people experience those, they get used to it. You made a comment about Super Cruise and the number of users.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the fitment rate might be 40% for the CT6, which is still a small volume.
Right.
But every CT6 owner said, or a lot of them said, they wouldn't buy another one without it.
Yeah.
And so that's testimony that, okay, once you have it, then you don't want to go back. It's like Apple CarPlay. Once you have it, you don't want to go back. Once you have a push-button start, you don't want to go back. So the more these systems get on the market, the more affordable we make it, I think the better it is. You look at even Hyundai. They have a lot of their systems automatically have the lane centering, and it's pretty active. Works actually pretty good. So when people get used to it, then they say, okay, I want this on my next vehicle. I'm thinking about buying my daughter a vehicle. I want her to have blind spot. I want her to have
AEB.
the lanes. I definitely want her to have AEB.
Right.
I don't want her on the phone, but I can't guarantee.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
I think about all of those. And I don't think technology is the limiting factor, though.
No, and I think it's to your point, it's getting consumers used to it, but it's also, there's still an education gap.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
understanding what lane centering does versus lane keeping is not something that is easily intuitive. And lane centering, which just sort of keeps you centered in the lane, and you're not supposed to let go of the steering
Right.
wheel, but it does take a little bit of the effort that you need to do. I mean, the best way to really describe that is kind of had a GoPro over in the same vehicle and film somebody without it on, and then film somebody with it on, and you can see how much less input they have to do. But explaining that to an end user at this point is not always the easiest thing to do. And I think there's still a lot of misconception to get over and get through that. Some people feel like if it's got lane centering, they can just kind of use one finger instead of using the whole thing. And that's maybe...
And they sort of do.
I don't know that was the intent. Maybe it was.
Well, maybe it's not consumer acceptance. Maybe it's consumer education.
Education, I think, is a really significant
Every
part of
OEM
this
is different.
issue.
All their HMIs
Yes.
are different, and I do think that I'm speaking from somebody who's in it, so I feel comfortable. But when I know people who have the technology on their vehicle because they wanted a certain trim level and never use it.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you and you, John. Okay, so we all drive a lot of cars, and when you get in a different car, how often do you turn off the lane departure warning?
I usually leave it on.
Yeah, I usually
Even
leave
when
it
it
on.
bugs me, I leave it on.
See, but
I do leave it on, and there are systems that are more aggressive than I would like them to be, and there are systems that annoy me. But I feel
you're a
like that's
patient
part
woman.
of.
Just like push that button.
Well, the reason for being in different vehicles is to understand how they're all operating and how they compare to one another. So I feel like if I'm annoyed by it, that's still something that I need to learn about the vehicle. And if I turn it off, I won't really understand the sensitivity to it. So I tend to leave them on.
Yeah, I leave it on too. There have in the past been some brands that I thought were pretty aggressive in all the beeping.
yeah.
Nissan and Mazda, I'll mention. But, I haven't noticed that this year or in the last year at all. My guess, have they throttled back some of the annoying beeping? They've gotten better at it, Aaron?
Some people have changed HMI. Sometimes your seat vibrates or something, so you don't annoy yourself and the rest of the passengers. But I think they've adjusted. I think some were very aggressive, and if you got even close to the line, it would beep. Some have realized, and also feedback. I mean. The nice thing about all the telematics and things in cars now, how many people turn that system off, and whether they turn it off every time or once in a while or whatever. So some of that feedback is, okay, people are turning the system off. It must be an issue. OEMs are usually really good about getting that user data and then reiterating or making changes to address that. So.
Yeah.
I have a question. Maybe you can help me understand. One of the features that has been popping up more lately that I have not had a great experience with, to be honest, intelligent cruise control. Where it reads the speed limit sign, excuse me, and then readjust your cruise control to acknowledge that speed sign. I had a car I was driving in, 696, which we're all pretty familiar with, at least in this conversation. And, it's 4 lanes, and I'm in, the left center lane. And the system read, more than once, the speed limit for the service drive.
Okay.
So I had it set for 3 miles over the speed limit, so all of a sudden it's trying to take me down to 43 miles an hour in the middle of the freeway.
Okay.
Fortunately, traffic wasn't super busy, and I realized pretty quickly what had gone wrong. So no accident ensued. I wasn't, fearful for my life entirely, but it was annoying. And I had a different situation where I was in traffic in a different vehicle in California, and the traffic was too heavy for it to do what it wanted to do, but it misread 65 as 85.
Okay.
And so it wanted to make me go 87.
Okay.
Obviously, adaptive cruise control works, and
Right.
the situation didn't go to. But I find those systems so far, there seems to be a lot of bad hits on adjusting for that speed limit. That one makes me a little bit nervous. Is there anything you know about those developments? Are we still working on those? What can we expect?
Yeah, so the answer is yes, but it's kind of twofold. There are some systems that actually don't use the camera to read the signs. They actually just use the nav data. And so whatever was in the nav data in terms of existing speed limits, that's what it'll use. And the map, the localization on the HD map, it probably doesn't have HD map. So it doesn't know where you are in the lane. And so it'll usually just stick with understanding, okay, this is the standard speed limit, and it probably wouldn't readjust the way that you described. And then there are systems that are trying to fuse both. So they're looking at the actual map data, and then they're saying, well, if I get a different sign because maybe construction or whatever, then I'll slow it down. The problem is the cameras now have a wider field of view. So you might have been in a vehicle that had stereo cameras, so it can see maybe 120 degrees. Our new mono cameras are now 100 degrees. So now you see more information, and the question is it going to detect? Well, the question is, when is the last time it saw a speed sign? And then, is this new one the only one there? And if there were two, which one would it detect? And that comes from data collection and labeling of the data, and then retraining the system to know, okay, if the road veers off, or if this is an exit, and then there happens to be a sign there, that you ignore that sign.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about some of these systems are you get updates, but not everybody's really using OTA. So what'll happen is, in the next release of the next platform, they'll fix it, and then the car that you would drive a year from now won't have it. But that's also why people are really pushing for OTA, so that when you have those interim steps or integral updates that really do address. I mean, depending on who's following you, that can be and how closely they're following, that can be a safety issue. So they want to try to address that. But the other thing that's coming into play is more HD map data. So you know exactly where you are in the lane, and then if you know you're not on the exit, you know to ignore that sign. And you also can get real-time traffic data of speed, flow, and everything. So I think we're going to see more and more enhancements, and that's not a huge leap. It doesn't take a lot of more memory or data. It's just a matter of how you utilize that data. Make sure you're not getting spoofed data, and then can react to that. So
Yeah,
cool.
It's an interesting one for me to watch, I think. And again, you get to consumer interest, and consumer education is going to be, when you get a system that does work like that, and they already don't necessarily understand adaptive cruise control. And I had mentioned this to one of the I think it was one of the OEMs, and they said, well, you could just turn it off. Like, hold on.
Yeah.
Not the right answer.
Yeah, that's right.
And what I do is, when I drive, I don't turn anything off usually, unless I'm feeling unsafe. But I want to know how this behaves differently from another one.
Right.
So every time I rent a car, I try to rent something different. I try to make sure it has ADAS technology on it. Thing is, you don't know, the car you're in, you don't know if it's utilizing map data, if it's utilizing camera data. Sometimes I try to see if I'm going through a construction zone, does it give me a different speed indicator on the map. So I think way too much when I'm driving these cars, but it's what I do. I love it. I love it.
Well, look, Aaron, it's been terrific having you on the show. We're going to have to wrap up this segment and take a quick commercial break, but thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Really
I
interesting.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, good stuff.
Thank
And
you.
I'm with you. No level 3.
Yeah.
No level 3.
Okay, we got to give a good shout out to our friends at Borg Warner coming up right now.
The world is changing at an ever-increasing pace. No matter what the mode of transportation, there is always the need for an efficient propulsion system. And that's exactly what Borg Warner has been doing since the earliest days of the automotive industry. We create innovative mobility technologies that reduce energy consumption and emissions while improving performance. Our proven track record has made us an industry leader in forward-looking propulsion solutions for combustion, hybrid, and electric vehicles.
All right, we're back. And let me see, is Dr. Data going to make an appearance on today's show?
I believe he will be.
All right.
Making an appearance. And so this, of course, I remember last week you guys all got it like that. I'm a little concerned. So I hope this week is better.
Guess what it means, and then he gets all pissed off when we guess it.
I know. I mean, it's just like, okay. So this is also so Katie, could you please bring up the first part of this? Okay, you mentioned driving in California. Okay, this is a fact. In 2018, there were 348,796,000 miles driven in the state of California, which means it was the #1 state where miles were racked up, okay? So that's a pretty big number, right?
Yeah.
Okay, next, please. Arkansas is the number 50 state, meaning that compared to California, it had far fewer miles. So what I want to know is what was the number of miles that were driven in 2018 in the great state of Arkansas? Was it 102,398,000, 78,242,000, 10,887,000, or 5,487,000 miles?
Okay, let's figure this out, Stephanie. There's roughly 40 million people almost in California.
Yeah.
I don't know what the population of Arkansas
That's what I was trying to
is.
remember.
I'm going to say it's 5 million. I'm guessing the people in Arkansas
right.
are going to lynch
That's
me
good.
for saying
So
that.
if you've got, if that's a
So
good.
1/4, and it was, what did you say for California? 396?
No, 348
348.
million.
So,
Or if you go 5 million times an average of 15,000 units a year, or 15,000 miles a year, which is more math that I don't do in my head, by the way.
so
I'm a little bit more gut-oriented on this one. I feel like 10 and 5 are just way too low, and 100 is too high. The other thing I would factor in, perhaps, is the distance. And
You guys are thinking way too hard about this.
Okay, I'm
Not
going to say
necessarily as close. B is where I want to
78
be.
million.
78 million?
Yeah.
Steph,
That's where I want to be as B. Yeah.
you want to be 78 million?
Yeah.
Katie?
Holy moly.
See,
Those people
know,
got to get out
I
and
figured,
drive.
like, the low one
It's only
just couldn't be
5.4
right.
million.
see, John, you were,
the lowest
see,
number.
you were there, and then you
Yeah.
moved away from that.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
And see, one of the things that I would suggest is perhaps part of it is consider the size of California
Yeah.
versus the size of Arkansas.
And
Yeah, but in California, you're going 5 miles an hour on the 105.
Well, I know, but I mean, but when you go somewhere far, I mean, there's far to go, right?
far to go. Yeah.
So
Okay.
anyway,
That was fun.
see, I'm glad.
So
was fun.
lots of news this week. Gary, what should we
this
dive
week
into?
you guys didn't get the answer. I'm very happy.
We do have a lot
All right,
of news
so
this week.
I think we need to start with the subject that we always talk about, that everybody wants to hear about, Tesla. They reported their fourth quarter earnings. John?
Well, look, I thought the numbers were decent. Very decent. And for the fourth quarter, I mean, they still lost
Right.
$775 million for the year or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think the thinking now amongst investors is, yeah, they lost money for 10 years in a row. But when you look at the fourth quarter and the third quarter, the investment community seems to be saying, much of the investment community, it looks like they've turned the corner. And 2020 is going to be a great year. You got the Chinese plant already up and running.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the Model Y going to go on sale in March. It's going to have better margins than the Model 3. They're going to unlock at some point this year, it looks like, this
Right.
FSD, full self-driving. And whether it works or not, apropos to our discussion
Right,
in the
right.
first half of the show, you got to cough up $7,000 to unlock that. There's going to be a bunch of Tesla owners that'll cough up that money. Plus, they've got this connectivity service. I think it's $10 a month that they're going to
Yeah,
start selling.
That was interesting.
So all I'm getting at is, it seems to me 2020 is going to be a pretty good year for Tesla.
It should be. I mean, again, you've got increased production. So unless somebody just stops buying them completely, you're going to have a better year than last year. When we looked at the fourth quarter, one number, it was good, but while they had some more vehicles sold, the revenue only went up just under 1%. So compared to fourth quarter last year. So
explain what that means to the
that means that-
non-analysts among
that-
us.
That means that they made less money on each car.
Okay, so they sold a Model 3
Sold more
this
cars.
year, and they made less money than they made on a Model 3 last year.
Or sold fewer Model S and X, and those are higher priced than
Okay,
the
so
Model 3. So there's a bunch of
everything
different
is
ways to do it.
combined, and then you...
Everything is combined. They had increased sales, but they had really flat revenue. So that's something for them to continue to work at. But again, in 2020, you just have more cars. So even if you have flat revenue, you're going to have more revenue in 2020. I mean,
Right.
I don't see how they don't have more revenue in 2020.
Well, my estimate is with the Chinese plant, their vehicle sales should be up almost 40% this year. I mean,
Yeah.
Okay,
so it's going to produce that commensurate kind of a bump in revenue.
Yeah.
All right, so I
it-
ask you
it
both this question. So you have pointed out many times, John, that other OEMs that sell electric vehicles all lose money on these electric vehicles.
Right.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Steph, you say that the number of vehicles that they sell in 2020 is likely to go up, and they made a slim margin. Does this mean that
They
Tesla...
made a slim increase in revenue.
So does this mean that Tesla is the only electric vehicle manufacturer of cars that makes money?
Well,
Well-
they didn't for the full year.
Yeah, they lost money for the year. They lost $750 million for
Yeah,
the
and
year.
you can't really.
So, but
Go quarter.
I believe 2020 will be fully profitable, full year for Tesla. That's just me, you know.
It's hard to see why it wouldn't be. I mean,
Right.
you almost have to, something unexpected has to
But there's
go.
only one other, Gary, that's going to make money on its electric vehicle, and that is Porsche.
Oh.
Because the Taycan starts at $180,000. I mean, how can you not make money?
Yeah.
But none of the others. None of the others.
Do you think they can make money?
On the Porsche or on Tesla? I think Tesla can.
No, on
On the Taycan?
Porsche, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're right,
Well, I don't know.
$180,000, you know.
Might have
You would
nice
think you should
leather.
be able to. It does have nice leather, but I don't know that it's more so than the other Teslas or than the other Porsches. And that 180 is where it starts. I mean, you're still going to add on.
Okay,
to-
so what is your sense of the number of those vehicles that will be sold?
I didn't look that up before.
I mean,
came
what-
over
just
here.
which-
I'm not even going to, you know.
Come on. Just throw something out there. Oh,
Globally? I'm not going to say.
Yeah.
Maybe
what about here?
Taycan?
Yeah.
Taycan.
Taycan,
Maybe.
didn't God, I want to say they started out at 10 to 15,000 a year, and then they
Maybe
doubled
20,
it based
20
on
or
the
20,
orders they got.
25. 20 or 25 for the year globally, which is not a bad number.
Is it a-
1,000,
but
that
is it a
is.
good number?
It
At
should be a good number.
$200,000
I
a
mean,
car,
yeah.
it's not a bad number at all.
Some good
I,
revenue.
I've talked to two people that have ordered them, and both of them are paying over $200,000 because they wanted mirrors that fold in and seats that heat.
Yeah.
What?
Oh yeah, Porsche's option list is
Which
stupid
is very
crazy.
consistent for Porsche.
Well, I mean, I was in a Mazda 6 the week before last, and the mirrors folded and the seats heated, and it sure. I mean, I could have bought, I don't know, 7 of them for that sort of money.
Right.
You know, I could have one for every day.
always execution and
Is
how-
one every
how
day of the
easy is
week?
it and how
I mean, you know, it's just like, okay, I drove one of those. All right, so.
Yeah.
All right, so sticking with electric vehicles, so
Right, we have a lot of-
GMC
yeah.
hinted or they didn't hint, they came out and
said it.
basically said
They
that they're going to
confirmed.
come out with the electric Hummer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this will have 1,000 horsepower, 11,500 foot-pounds of torque, and 0 to 60 in 3 seconds.
And I feel like the torque number is really important for truck drivers. I'm feeling like the 3 seconds, 0 to 60, might be less important.
Okay, but come on. Well, I mean, what is it? I mean,
Why not?
So John, what's going on here?
I think it's
Okay,
brilliant. Okay, here's the issue. It's like the controversy with Ford putting the Mustang name on the Mach-E. Here's what these companies are looking at. They've all tried to do electric cars. You know, Ford did some electric cars. They were compliance cars, okay? But GM really thought it was putting its best foot forward with the Chevrolet Bolt, and it was sales-proof, essentially. I mean, the numbers stunk. So now they're rethinking, wow, we got to blow out of the, break out of the clutter. We got to make people go, huh? What? They got what? So if we, as Ford, call this a Mustang, and I mean, look at the headlines they've already gotten.
Right.
Now GMC is saying, hey, we'll call this trim line Hummer. We're going to get headlines all over the place. It's a marketing ploy to say, blammo, we've got to break through the clutter. Because the only one that can do it so far is Uncle Elon. He's able to do it.
And he doesn't, as you pointed out yesterday, he does it with no advertising. So,
Okay.
on Hummer, I think the one difference I see between Hummer and Mach-E, and not having seen anything but the grill on the Hummer, right? And the numbers are great. GM knows how to build a pickup truck that meets what pickup truck buyers want. I have no doubt they're going to execute a terrific product. But with the Mustang Mach-E, calling it Mustang internally in Ford set a bar differently than when it was just an EV crossover. Hummer doesn't necessarily have the strength to be able to do that as a brand. Mustang, obviously, Ford for 50 years, best-selling sports coupe, all of the things that it is. It's so tied up in their history. You know, Hummer was around for a little while, and when it left, it was big gas-guzzling SUVs, which are kind of opposite. I think they can make it work, even though this is completely opposite from what it built before. And Hummer wasn't playing in the full-size pickup space.
But both this
so
be
calling
a
it
pickup
Hummer,
or an SUV, though. I think it'll be a SUV.
It'll be both, I believe. But calling it Hummer doesn't do anything in terms of galvanizing the company and helping them understand what this vehicle needs to be. That's what Mustang Mach-E did. Aside from that, I agree that both of it's about marketing. And more so with Hummer, I've been corrected. This is not the popular opinion, but I'm like, hey, why couldn't it have just been a GMC? Why do we need to necessarily pull out the Hummer name? Is this just a little bit of, to your point, it's marketing buzz, and you're going to get a lot of buzz out of it, but was it the only way to do it? And on a long-term basis, is it going to be sustained for 10, 15 years? Is this a brand that's going to be around? Is this just a flat? Was it easy? Was it easy and not necessarily creative? So I question not whether they'll be able to do it, but whether it was the only way to do it and whether it was maybe the best way to have done it.
So they also announced this week that they're spending $2.3 billion in retooling the Detroit Hamtramck assembly plant to build things like this, and this will become their electric vehicle truck plant. So I agree with you that by calling it Hummer, you immediately get some flash on that. Because if they were to say, it's the electric Silverado.
Yeah, yawn.
Yeah, I mean, and this is why, I mean, I think that
Electric F-150 seems to be able to grab.
See, but I wonder about that. Okay,
I don't know.
So
at least grabs attention.
I mean,
tows a train.
Is the electric F-150 going to do even a rounding error of the number of gas-powered F-150s that are sold?
No.
Right.
And but neither will the Hummer.
will the Rivian-based truck that Ford has or that Lincoln has, will that sell bigger numbers? And I think it will.
That's not where.
Yeah, I think it will, because
may,
it should be having a dedicated skateboard, even though I hate that term, having a dedicated skateboard as a dedicated EV from scratch. It's going to be a better vehicle than gutting an F-150 and stuffing it full of batteries.
Well, and utility vehicles have more consumers, and there's more opportunity for a buyer than there is a pickup truck. As strong as pickup truck sales are, it's not the right answer for everybody. There's more people that can adapt to an electric SUV than can adapt to an electric pickup truck. So I think from that perspective, there's more opportunity for Lincoln. But for all three of the companies, one of the problems is if you buy into the fact that electric is the way to go, and in 10, 20, 30 years, it's the answer, you can't wait. They can't be like, oh, yeah, it's 2026. This first one is selling pretty well. Maybe now we'll think about doing it. Yeah, they've got to figure out how to do this now. And so right now you've got this really difficult time where there are going to be more electric vehicles than there is demand. and these companies are going to have to be committed to wait it out and suffer through the lower volume in the initial stages, and the tendency to try and put it into a premium product to grab more buyers and to get people who are willing to spend more. There aren't an increased number of premium buyers, so you're still fighting over the same little pie. But it's almost a learning pain. It's a growing process that this market is going to have to go through.
So, there was an announcement that came out yesterday that UPS, the package delivery service, ordered 10,000 trucks from a company named Arrival, which is based in London. And these people, I contacted them, and they basically have a skateboard, as it were, a platform, and they're saying that they can make this bigger, they can make this smaller, they can configure it to suit the needs. Because I was saying, okay, give me some specs on this thing, and they're just basically saying, well,
We can make whatever.
well, it's just like basically the range is dependent on the size of the vehicle we make. So UPS makes this announcement. They have invested money in this company, Arrival, which Arrival apparently has a micro factory strategy whereby they want to set up factories,
Small local ones.
to build these things, right? And UPS put money in them. Earlier this month, the Hyundai Motor Group put, I believe, 100 million pounds in this company to build these things. Then there was the announcement between UPS and Waymo that UPS is going to start using the Waymo Pacifica vans in the greater Phoenix area for delivery of package. So I'm thinking, all of this discussion of consumer SUVs, pickup trucks, what have you, is not where this is all going to go. I think it's going to go
Commercial.
for
The
commercial.
commercial
vehicles.
truck end.
And how many did Amazon order from Rivian?
100,000 to be delivered over a decade.
Right.
And it's a big number, but it's also a long delivery period.
Right. So
No,
that's
I'm
where
with you.
I don't
and I
disagree
even think
now.
I think the whole autonomous thing. I mean,
Is going to be
it's
first
gonna
on the
be
commercial side.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree with you. It's funny at how many car companies sneered at fleet and commercial. Boy, I'll tell you, I would really, as a car company, want to be in fleet and commercial right now. It's a growing, retail was down last year. Commercial was up almost 5%. It's less cyclical. It's more profitable. It's a great place to be. Commercial vans, red hot right now.
Yeah, and on the EV side, that's happening as well too. It is interesting to see Amazon and UPS invest in these things, and you feel like those companies are trying to also find a way to get to lower cost transportation. And there's that dilemma, right? The EV is more expensive, the batteries are more expensive at this point, but they're hoping for lower running costs. But what you put on that skateboard, I mean, even Rivian is saying that the Amazon Prime van is going to run on a low cost line, where the stuff for consumers is going to be on the high
Right.
cost line. These should be cheaper to produce.
well, because you think about it, I mean, most of these delivery things are, have a deterministic route. They know where they're going, and then they come back to the depot, and they can plug in, right? If you buy one, you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't know where I'm going today. I'm going, so you need more range. So, you have this ability to, more purposely build the commercial vehicle for
Does
the
it
application.
need 400 miles range to be a
Right.
prime delivery van that's going to go, over southeastern Michigan in a day? Can't drive 400 miles
Yeah,
delivering
and the arrival
packages in a day
person,
anyway.
the arrival person told me that in some instances, commercial vehicles within urban areas drive no more than 30 miles a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's absolutely true. And Stephanie, you raised a really good point. All that fleets care about, well, I mean, let's boil it down to the basics, right? They care about a lot of things, but the most basic thing is total cost of ownership, cost per mile or kilometer. And so they will happily pay more money up front for an electric, maybe even autonomous vehicle, if they know the total cost of ownership is going to be lower.
Right.
Consumers, not so much.
No.
You can tell them, hey, you drive this 10 years, you're going to save money. And they go, yeah, but it costs more.
And UPS at least already has a fleet. Like Amazon is still working with it and getting into and has Prime vans running around now. But that's new for them in the last 3 or 4 years. And so they're still trying to figure out how they want to manage that and how much they want to own and how that's really going to work out. Making it as cheap as possible, you go to your supplier.
Yeah.
Okay, now we got to take another quick commercial break. We're going to come back. Gary, I know you got more topics for us, but first, a shout out to our friends at Bridgestone and DIA MTS.
Whether they're electric, autonomous, or connected, tomorrow's cars must be developed quickly with the highest precision, and they have to be lightweight. DIA MTS can provide what you need, from advanced manufacturing machinery to lightweight components. Learn more at our website at www.d-iamts.com or visit our showroom right next to Metro Airport in Detroit.
All right, we're back. And Gary, I know you got other things that you
Okay,
want to
so
get into.
so not only was yesterday the 40th anniversary of the Rubik's Cube, but in San Francisco yesterday, private vehicles were banned from Market Street.
I heard
and
that.
if you know San Francisco at all, Market Street is
The main
a big
drag.
shopping street. Yeah, the main drag. Now buses can still go on Market Street, and streetcars can go on Market Street, and ambulances go on Market Street, and cabs can go on Market Street. But Ubers, nope.
Nope. And the section, I think, is fairly short where the
It's pretty long. It's east of 10th Street, so you've got a pretty good chunk of real estate there that they're doing this. Okay.
it's where it's uncomfortable to drive anyway.
Yeah, I mean it's but then I read that okay, so these are two things and they're completely different but sort of the same. So as we all know, media is under huge pressure in terms of advertising going away, and it becomes very tough to do things. And The Guardian will no longer accept advertising from fossil fuel extractive companies, meaning it will no longer take money from oil companies. And oil companies do a fair amount of advertising, particularly in international publications like The Guardian. Or, now admittedly The Guardian's a little on the left, but at the end of the day, here's this company basically saying, you know what, we're giving up that revenue. They're still going to have ads from car companies, by the way, but they're saying, the oil extractive companies, so BP and Shell and ExxonMobil and so on will not. So here we have a city that's basically saying, okay, we're taking part of our main drag and saying, no more private cars. And then you have a media group that is desperate for cash saying, you know what, we're going to suck it up and not take money.
Wow.
I mean, 10 years ago, would either of you thought any of this would be possible?
Well, actually, 10 years ago, there were cities that had banned
Portland
ICEs
redid.
from the city center, mostly in Europe, right? So I think this is a continuing trend. In fact, by 2025, we'll see a small handful, maybe not even a handful, of countries banning ICE new vehicles from being sold. And by 2030, there's, I want to say, over a dozen countries. I added it up. By 2030, countries that sell today 12 million new vehicles a year will have banned the ICE. So, the trend has already started. It's only going to accelerate.
And that's interesting because the dilemma there, too, is then affordability for your consumers. I mean, it's one thing to say in 2019 or in 2018, we're going to ban this in 2030, and then 2030 is around and people can't quite afford to get around, or there's a good enough population that can't afford to move on. There will be pushback.
It's very easy for politicians to say, oh, we got to do this, global warming, we got to save the planet and all that, and I agree with all that, but I keep pointing out it takes 20 years to turn a fleet over, more than 20 years. So all the bright, shiny, brand new 2020s rolling off the assembly line will probably not be off the road until about 2040. Yeah. And some people say, oh, the politicians will step in and stop that. And I'm like, try taking people's cars away from them. Go ahead. Go try.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
let me see how that works out. And the Market Street one is still as interesting, too, if I remember that part of San Francisco well enough. there's a block up. So then the second half is, okay, you for that 3/4 of a mile or mile, you can't drive on it. You can cross it, but you can't drive on it. You've shifted that traffic to the block up. I don't know if they've really addressed that.
Well,
side,
I was
that
recently reading
traffic flow.
was
You just sort of randomly go, no, we're going to put them all over here.
I believe in 14th Street in New York City has been pedestrianized, okay? And they did a study.
Times Square.
They did a study on 14th Street to see whether suddenly there was traffic jams on either side of it, and it didn't work that way. So it actually
It may
was
not. They may have
beneficial.
done that. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like the last time I was in New York was a few weeks ago, and it was a traffic jam. The entire city was a traffic jam. So,
Well, there's this
maybe
whole
it's not-
thought that, in the 20th century, we built our cities around the automobile. Parking, driving, all that stuff. And now there's a thought of cities have got to take back control of being cities again, not just laid out in ways that make it easy for the automobile. And, I mentioned Times Square. When they banned traffic from Times Square, there was like, this is an impossibility that you can't. And boy, Times Square has never been better than it is right now with no cars driving through it.
you
Is this
certainly.
heresy you're talking here?
It is heresy.
Is there going to be like a lightning bolt coming? Because if it is, I want you to move over there.
Well, look, I'm all in favor of a healthy auto industry. This show helps promote it, really. But I just did the numbers. If you go back to the year 2000, there were a little over 700 million vehicles in the world. At the end of 2019, there was 1.4 billion. So in 20 years' time, we doubled the number of vehicles in the world. I don't think planet Earth can afford to be doubled again.
I don't know that it can either. And I think that cities that are looking at banning cars from certain areas, you just have to think about what you're doing. And then certainly the marketplace thing may work out quite well. You're too right. Times Square worked out pretty well. There are areas. It's just you've got to make it the right zone and still have pattern enough for the car to get around it and people to get down there. And weather's going to play into it. How far are people willing to walk at different points of the weather? And
But the industry is going to switch, and a lot of top executives are talking. The future of the industry is not selling cars; it's selling miles. How many miles? And this is why they're all talking about we're going to become mobility companies, and it's not just going to be cars. We are going to sell you mobility. Whether they pull that off or not is another discussion, but that's where they're all
that's what
thinking.
we're thinking. Yeah, and it sounds good when you say you can take that vehicle mile cost down. Like the math all works. It sounds really great. When you go from owning your car to just buying a few miles on it, leasing never really works out. Renting never really works out on the long-term basis. And so on a personal level, when you try to figure out how to manage your life and your finances and things like that, it's going to be interesting to see if that fundamentally works through different economic cycles, if it works better in certain areas than others, and different things like that.
So to go back to your point about leasing, so leasing doesn't work out for the consumer
Right.
or for the OEM?
Well, for the consumer,
Okay,
you're perpetually having a payment. When you're
Exactly.
renting, you perpetually have a payment. You own a house, you still have to put money into it. You own a car, you still have to put money into it, but it's generally less than the cost of the thing. So if you switch to miles, that works for a while, but then, you get into a point where
Then
the economy...
the consumer's just buying more miles, and I'm the OEM. I'm like, damn, keep driving.
If the cost is low enough that it's less, there's potential for it to work. But gosh, that feels like almost they say they want to make less money than they do now, and that doesn't really work. That doesn't pencil. So I don't know. We'll wait and see how it comes together. And I think that it's going to take a long time for these things to really come through. And again, really important to the whole conversation is that it's going to be regional and cities and certain areas. The population and the density will make it much easier to shift to a different model. And some areas will be much more difficult.
Okay, George from Sunnyvale just wrote in to say they banned the cars on Market Street to reduce pedestrian accidents, not for emissions or anything like that.
Yeah,
But,
that makes
but
sense.
it all ties together. It's this whole idea of traffic calming, where you have narrower lanes, you have roundabouts, you slow things down, and Yeah,
It's a theory anyway.
it's a theory.
Stephanie drives 3 miles an hour above the speed limit.
And
I'm
so
just
disappointed.
I know.
Only 3 miles? Come on.
Scofflaw.
I
You know, it's a law in Michigan. Everybody has to
got it.
drive 5 over, minimum.
In that particular day, in that particular situation, that's what was going on.
I'm being
That's
facetious.
all she's going to admit to.
Yeah. Anything else,
It was
Gary?
really 95. No.
Well, there was a big move in the supplier industry this week with Borg Warner purchasing Delphi Technologies, right?
Yes, Delphi
That's the
Technologies.
official name. So we had Aaron, who worked at the Delphi that became Aptiv, which still exists on its own.
Yep.
So now we have two suppliers getting together, rather major suppliers. What's going on?
In this case, their product lines are really complementary, and it makes a lot of sense in the short run for sure. One of the things when you look at that, and they talk about cost synergies in the first 3 years, you know, it's into your sales and marketing space, it's into your office spaces and things like that. But where I don't necessarily see them saving money for coming together is in the development and the research and development costs, because they had complementary product lines, not overlapping product lines. So they're not saving, not on the long term, I'm not sure they're going to save a lot of money on research and capital investment, which is the tough nut to crack right now, supporting combustion engines and hybrids and electrics and everything. So that part of it was not necessarily a flag that it shouldn't happen by any stretch, but that's where I'm not sure that it's going to really help them in the end. I don't think
But
it's
it moves them more
their
to
CapEx
the-
is going to be any lower in 5 years.
To the more to the hybrid electrified
yeah.
space than
It
perhaps
does. It
previously.
helps Borg Warner by adding some more electronics. The Delphi, I think most particularly the electronic controls and the software controls was the big element that Borg Warner got hold of there. But overall, it seems like a decent fit.
What do you think, John?
No, I would agree with everything that Stephanie just said. You know, Borg Warner is really good at machining things. Delphi is got pretty good competency in powertrain with anything that's got electrics or electronics running through it. So, for example, you know, Borg's got this neat electric motor for EVs. It's got a gear reduction unit. Now with Delphi, it's going to have the inverter and all the power electronics. So you've brought that all in-house. And as you work to integrate these things and make them smaller and lower cost, it's a whole lot better to control it all yourself in-house.
Yeah.
So do you think there'll be an opportunity going forward if we have more electric vehicles? I mean, for a very long time, you know, the characteristic of what made a car company was its powertrain prowess. You know, you have an electric motor, it's just basically, they're all pretty much the same, and it's just basically your software that is going to make the difference between whether you go really fast or really efficiently. Is it possible that it'll no longer be as important, and that companies would say, you know what, Borg Warner, we're going to buy it all from you?
You know, look, I love engines, whether they're electric or piston and diesel or gas or whatever, but the vast majority of the public has no clue what's under their head, under their hood, excuse me. And so,
The head part too.
yeah. But so, you know, what the customer cares about, does it start every time? Is it relatively quiet? Does it accelerate well? Does it get decent fuel economy? That's all they care about. They don't care what's under the hood. With electrics, though, let me say first, for enthusiasts, all that really matters.
Right.
They know their stuff. Well, same goes for electric car enthusiasts. You know, when we had Sandy Monroe here a couple of weeks ago, he had talked about how on the new Nissan Leaf, there's these magnetic fluxes in the motor that they tore down that he said, I've never seen anybody do that before. And earlier when we had him on, he was talking about the magnetic arrays that Tesla has in its motors and how that was so impressive. And when you look at Tesla's range per kilowatt hour, you know, on the Model Y, it's going to be the best in the world. I got to believe their electric motor plays a role in that efficiency. And so amongst EV enthusiasts, or really even car enthusiasts, having that really cool electric motor is going to count for something.
All right, short of Sheldon Cooper, are normal people just going to say, you know,
Well, they do now. I mean, they don't know who built the engine now. It doesn't. The normal people don't care. That's not going to change. But the other part of it is that's still what moves the vehicle. You don't really want to get yourself so far that you don't understand it and you're just shipping it out. Where that mix is, how much they buy, how much they have in-house, each company is going to find a different way to manage that. But it's still the thing that makes it move forward. If you're building a car, you have to know how to build the part that makes it move forward. I feel like that's something that somehow still remains very important to them.
You could have a guy in a back room in an office somewhere who's sitting there going, you know what, this is how it does. Here's the plans, but let's go buy that other stuff.
There will be components that are bought, and surely that'll be part of it as well. But they're gonna have to maintain that competency and that understanding, and in order to have the differentiation between one to another, and you only are going to be able to do that if you know what you want. I mean, you can tell BorgWarner, make it feel like this or make it feel like that, and they're capable, but at some point you're still going to want to be able to finesse it yourself. Even when companies buy transmissions, they're finessing the logic themselves at some point. So I think that there's still opportunity for automakers to keep a good chunk of at least that knowledge has to be in-house. It's the putting the motor together that they might not have to do.
See, it seems to me if they're selling miles, they could care less about motors.
Right. And that may
Want them to buy
what?
that miles from you and not miles
well,
from somebody else, and you
know,
still have to have a reason to do that.
And if yours breaks, don't worry, I'll get you another one. And,
Hey, look, we've burned up an hour. I think we're going to have to wrap this up. Yeah, and we got some phone calls here. We got some questions here. I think we're going to have to push them back to next week. So I apologize to those of you who sent this in. Hopefully we'll be able to get to it then, but we do have to wrap up. Anyway, Stephanie Brinley, IHS Markit, always great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. It's great to be here.
And Gary, come on back next week. Let's do another one.
all right, sounds like a plan.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion. BorgWarner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world. And by DIA MTS, for advanced manufacturing machinery and lightweight components.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.